Welcome to the Practical World Podcast, your gateway to work insights and captivating stories from Thailand and beyond. This is the real world. This is the Practical World Podcast.
All right, welcome everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into a topic that's everywhere these days, greenwashing.
It feels like every company out there wants to be seen as eco-friendly, right?
Yeah, exactly. But how much of it is genuine? I mean, how can we tell what's real and what's just like clever marketing?
That's what we're going to try to figure out today.
We've got a ton of sources for this deep dive. Consumer guides, investigative reports, even some early drafts of upcoming regulations.
It's like we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain.
Exactly. We're going to help you become a total pro at spotting greenwashing so you can make those informed choices.
And the first thing we got to talk about is one of the most common tactics companies use: vague language.
Vague language. You mean like when they just slap a label on something that says eco-friendly and call it a day?
Yep, that's a classic example.
Hmm.
These terms, they sound great, but they don't really tell us anything specific. What does sustainable packaging even mean, really?
Right. Good point.
Like, is it recyclable? Is it made from recycled materials? Does it magically disappear after you use it?
Yeah.
Who knows? To avoid falling for that trick, you got to look for those concrete details. Instead of just sustainable packaging, look for made from 90% post-consumer recycled materials, or certifications like the Forest Stewardship Council label if it's a wood product.
Okay, so it's about looking beyond those buzzwords. Dig a little deeper.
Exactly. One of our sources, they actually found a plastic bottle that was labeled 100% sustainable, but there was absolutely no information about recycling. It was just ridiculous.
Right.
It just shows how easy it is to be misled.
Okay, so vague language is a big red flag. Got it. But what about carbon offsets? It seems like every company's planting trees these days.
Right.
Is that always greenwashing?
Not necessarily, but it's definitely an area where you got to be super critical.
Okay.
Planting trees, great thing. But companies often use offsets to basically just appear green.
While continuing their not so green practices.
Exactly.
So they're like trying to cancel out their emissions by paying someone else to plant trees.
You got it. But the problem is, offsets don't always address the root cause of the problem, their own emissions.
Yeah, it's like trying to lose weight by paying someone else to go to the gym for you.
Aha, perfect analogy. And some companies, they take it even further. They'll use offsets as an excuse to actually expand their polluting activities.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah. Like, think of the oil industry, right? They might invest in some reforestation projects, sounds good, but at the same time, they're out there drilling for more oil.
Ah, that's so frustrating. So how can we tell if a company's actually using offsets responsibly?
You got to look at the bigger picture. Are they making real, concrete efforts to reduce their own emissions too? Investing in renewable energy, improving their efficiency, actually transitioning to more sustainable practices.
So offsets can be part of the solution, but they shouldn't be the only strategy.
Definitely not. Companies need to take responsibility for their own environmental impact, not just try to pay their way out of it.
Absolutely. And speaking of responsibility, another thing we got to watch out for is what's called distant goals.
Oh, yeah, distant goals. The classic, we'll be carbon neutral by 2050 pledge.
Exactly. Sounds impressive, but
But often there's no concrete plan, no clear milestones along the way.
it's easy to make a promise for like decades down the road.
Yeah.
Much harder to actually take action today.
Right. One of our sources mentioned Crocs, the shoe company. They actually had to push back their net zero goal by a whole decade.
Wow, really?
They realized they didn't have a realistic plan to achieve it.
Oh, that's kind of embarrassing.
It happens. What you really want to look for are companies with those short-term measurable targets. What are they doing this year, next year, the year after that?
Okay, so holding them accountable in the here and now, not just decades from now, makes sense.
And another tactic that can be super misleading is what's called tokenism.
Tokenism.
Yeah. It's when a company focuses on one green product line, maybe, or a single initiative, but then ignores the rest of their operations.
So it's not enough to just have a sustainable collection if the rest of your business is, still contributing to the problem.
Exactly. H&M is a classic example. They have their Conscious collection, which uses some organic cotton and recycled materials, which is great, but they're still one of the world's largest fast fashion retailers. They churn out billions of garments every year.
And most of those aren't recyclable, right?
Nope. So you got to look at the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Does that green initiative really address the core of their business? What's their real impact?
So it's not just about whether they're doing something good, but whether that good is actually making a meaningful difference.
Well said. And that brings us to another tricky area, misleading certifications and labels.
Ugh. Yeah, those can be confusing. I actually bought a shirt once that was labeled as bamboo. I thought, oh, eco-friendly.
Yeah.
But it turns out it was actually rayon.
Oh, yeah, heavily processed, not nearly as sustainable as it
I
sounds.
know. It was so frustrating.
There are so many certifications and labels out there. It's hard to know what's legit.
So how can we tell the real deal from the fakes?
Do your research. Don't just take a label at face value. Look up the certification online.
Okay, so what should we be looking for specifically?
Is the certification from a reputable, independent third party? Are the standards clear, transparent? Does it cover the whole life cycle of the product, from raw materials to end of life disposal?
That's really helpful. So it's about looking beyond those catchy labels, doing some detective work.
Exactly. And hey, you can always contact the company directly and just ask them for more info about their certifications and practices.
Good idea. So we've covered a lot here. Vague language, carbon offsets, distant goals, tokenism, misleading certifications. It feels like a minefield out there.
It can be. Greenwashing is a sophisticated business, and companies are constantly coming up with new ways to make themselves look good.
It's like a game, almost. We have to stay one step ahead.
But don't worry, we got you. In part 2, we're going to explore how regulations and consumer activism are actually starting to turn the tide.
Okay, now that's what I want to hear. I'm ready for some good news.
We'll get into all that after the break. Stay tuned.
So we've been talking about all these ways companies try to trick us with their greenwashing. It can feel a little overwhelming, you know?
I get that. It's easy to feel discouraged when you see all these tactics being used. But the good news is there's a lot of positive change happening too.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping to hear more about. Our sources mentioned like some big shifts in regulations and even consumer activism.
Yeah, that's right. There's this global movement toward more transparency and accountability, which is essential if we want to combat greenwashing effectively.
Let's talk about those regulations first. Our source material highlighted the EU's Green Claims Directive. Sounds like a big deal. What exactly is that?
It basically forces companies to put their money where their mouth is, no more vague buzzwords or those unsubstantiated eco labels.
Right.
If a company makes an environmental claim in the EU, now they have to back it up with solid data.
So no more slapping a climate neutral sticker on something without actually explaining how they calculated that, huh?
Exactly. And they have to use standardized metrics too, like the ones developed by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol,
Okay.
which is a globally recognized framework for measuring emissions. So everyone's on the same page,
It's got harder to cheat.
Exactly. It's way harder for companies to manipulate data or present misleading information.
That's huge. What about other regulations? Are there more in the works that we should know about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The EU is also rolling out something called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD for short.
CSRD.
It basically broadens the scope of what companies have to disclose.
Okay.
So it's not just their carbon footprint anymore. It's a whole range of environmental and social factors.
So it's like how the entire company operates.
Precisely. They got to report on things like their impact on biodiversity, their water usage, how they promote fair labor practices throughout their supply chain, and a lot more.
Wow. No more hiding behind one green initiative while ignoring the rest of their business, huh?
That's the goal. And to make sure these reports aren't just empty words, they're going to be audited every 5 years by an independent third party.
Oh, wow. That's serious. The EU is really setting the bar high.
Yeah.
What about the rest of the world? Any similar trends popping up?
Yeah, actually. The EU is definitely leading the charge. But other countries are catching on. The US, for instance. They just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes a lot of investment in clean energy and sustainable tech.
So that's like creating a financial incentive for companies to adopt greener practices.
Exactly. And that's powerful. Similar policies are being implemented in places like Canada, China, and Australia, too. So there's a global shift happening.
So it's not just about punishing polluters anymore. It's about encouraging sustainability.
Right.
That's really encouraging. But regulations are only one part of the puzzle, right? What about us? What can consumers do?
Oh, consumers have so much power. By making informed choices and supporting companies that are actually committed to sustainability, we can literally shift market demand.
I like that. But how do we even know which companies to support? There's so much greenwashing out there. It's hard to tell what's real.
Yeah, I hear you. Our sources did mention some helpful tools, though. Independent organizations and platforms that provide ratings and assessments of company sustainability performance.
Oh, cool. So those can help us cut through the marketing jargon.
Exactly. They help you make more informed choices.
Can you give us some examples? Like what kind of platforms should we be checking out?
Yeah, sure. There's Good on You, for example. It's a great app that rates fashion brands based on their environmental and social impact. And the Environmental Working Group, EWG, they have this whole database of verified products that meet their standards.
So like before I buy something, I can do a little research, make sure the company actually aligns with my values.
Exactly. And another thing you can do is reach out to companies directly and ask about their practices. A company that's genuinely committed to sustainability will be happy to provide more info.
Right. While greenwashers will probably be vague or try to dodge the question.
Yep.
Okay, so it's about demanding transparency and holding them accountable. But beyond like individual choices, what else can we do? How can we make a bigger impact?
Collective action, supporting organizations that are pushing for those stronger environmental regulations and holding corporations accountable. That's huge.
So like contacting our elected officials,
Yeah.
signing petitions, donating to environmental groups.
Yes, all of that. And
Yeah.
don't underestimate the power of just like sharing your knowledge. Talk to your friends and family about greenwashing, help them become more critical
The
consumers.
more people who know about it, the less effective greenwashing will be.
Exactly. It's about building a movement of conscious consumers,
Right.
people who demand better from the companies they support.
I like that. Creating a culture of accountability.
Right. Because authentic sustainability requires a collective effort. It's not just about individual actions, it's about pushing for change at every level.
This has been so insightful. We've learned about those sneaky tactics, but also the positive changes happening and like the power we have as consumers.
And there's still more to discuss. In part 3, we're going to go even deeper. We'll talk about how to develop a more critical mindset and how to avoid falling for greenwashing when you're bombarded with information all the time.
I'm ready for it. Let's keep this conversation going.
Eh.
So we've spent this deep dive, like really getting into the nitty gritty of greenwashing.
Mhm.
All those ways companies try to make us think they're more sustainable than they really are.
Yeah, we've uncovered a lot, like how vague language and those misleading certifications can create this illusion of progress.
Right. When in reality, they might not be doing much at all.
Exactly. And we talked about how focusing on those really distant goals can also be a problem.
Yeah, like we'll be carbon neutral by 2050. Sounds great, but what are they doing right now?
Exactly. But we also talked about some of the positive stuff that's happening too, right? Like those stricter regulations that are starting to emerge.
Yeah. And the power of consumer activism.
Yeah,
We can make a difference.
absolutely. But there's one more crucial thing we need to talk about, something that can help each of us become like true greenwashing detectives.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this secret weapon?
It's the power of questioning, going beyond the surface, beyond those catchy slogans and labels, and demanding real transparency from the companies we support.
So, like, we need to channel our inner skeptic.
Exactly. Greenwashing often works because, we want to do good. We want to make ethical choices.
Yeah.
So it plays on our assumptions and our trusts.
We see those feel-good buzzwords and we just, like, automatically believe them.
Right. So we need to be maybe not cynical, but definitely more discerning.
Okay, I like that. More discerning. So how do we do that?
Well, for starters, you got to demand proof. Don't just accept vague statements, like responsibly sourced or eco-conscious. Ask for specifics.
So instead of just saying made with recycled materials, we should be looking for something like made with 60% post-consumer recycled plastic.
Exactly. The more specific, the better. And don't be afraid to ask about those specific certifications too. Like, are they from a legit third-party organization? Do those standards actually mean something?
One of our sources also mentioned that we should look beyond a company's website or their marketing stuff, like actually dig into their sustainability reports if they have them.
Oh, yeah, great point. Look for companies that are publishing detailed reports, and ideally ones that have been independently audited too.
So we can see the whole picture,
Yeah,
not just the like carefully curated version they present in their ads.
right. And another important thing to remember is that real sustainability is a journey. It's not like a destination.
Yeah.
No company is perfect. There's always room for improvement. So what you want to look for are companies that are transparent about their efforts.
Okay. and that are committed to continuous improvement.
So they're like willing to admit where they're falling short and what they're doing to get better.
Exactly. And they're open to having a real conversation about their impact. They're not just trying to like shut down any criticism.
It's about finding companies that are actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as consumers, we have a responsibility to hold them accountable, use our wallets to support the companies that are really trying.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's a little daunting to realize just how much greenwashing is out there, but it's also empowering to know that we have the knowledge to spot it.
Yeah, it's about becoming more conscious consumers and really thinking critically about the choices we make.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of greenwashing. We hope you've learned a lot and that you feel more equipped to, navigate the complexities of sustainability.
Absolutely. Remember, we all have the power to create change. Let's use it wisely.
Thank you for joining. This is the Practical World Podcast.